This is Building Bridges with Michael Hershman.
Hello, I'm Michael Hershman, and welcome to Building Bridges, That Which Unites Us, a candid look at culture, democracy, and finding common ground. Today, I'm pleased to be joined by David Rubenstein, co-founder and co-chairman of the Carlyle Group, one of the world's largest and most successful private investment firms. A recipient of the Presidential Medal of Freedom, David chairs several boards, including the Council on Foreign Relations, and is an active philanthropist, respected historian, and New York Times bestselling author. His most recent book, The Highest Calling, Conversations on the American Presidency, offers both a look back and a timely guide forward. David, it's good to see you, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Pleasure is all mine. Thank you for having me.
So look, you had the privilege over your years of actually meeting a number of presidents, George W. Bush, I should say, Joe Biden, Donald Trump, meeting and talking with Bill Clinton, along with his wife, Hillary, Barack Obama. And now you've written a book, not only speaking to some of these ex-presidents, but also speaking to experts on those who are no longer with us, if you will. Tell me a little bit about why you decided to do this book. And by the way, how you found enough time to do it.
Well, my theory is if you really want to do something in life, you'll figure out how to get the time to do it. So it was a subject I was interested in. It's largely because of the things you've already suggested. As a young boy, I was interested in the presidency. John Kennedy drove by my house as a young boy, and I saw him. I waved to him. I was sure he was waving back at me when he waved, but obviously he was not. But I was inspired to go into public service because of him. And ultimately, I went to work for Ted Sorensen in a law firm in New York. Ted Sorensen had been the principal speechwriter for John Kennedy. And I wanted to go into the government and work in the White House just as Sorensen had done. I didn't think I had the charm, the good looks, the money, or whatever it took to be a candidate, but I thought I could be an advisor. And ultimately, I got a job working in a campaign for a man running for president named Jimmy Carter. And despite the fact when I joined the campaign, he was 34 points ahead. And when I was finished, he won by 1 point. He still gave me a job in the White House. And I served for 4 years as Deputy Domestic Policy Advisor to President Carter. Unfortunately, I got inflation of 18%, which is not very acceptable. We lost the re-election campaign, and I had to go back and practice law, which I wasn't that good at. And then I stayed in Washington, built my firm that you talked about, and I got to know presidents over the years. I don't give money to politicians, so I'm not a fundraiser, but I would support philanthropic projects that maybe some presidents liked, and I would get to know them from various other means. And so I really always been fascinated by the presidency, and I've known all the presidents since Jimmy Carter, some better than others. And I just thought I've had a chance for me to give my views on the presidency would come out in this book in a way that I thought would be acceptable to people who are interested in the presidency. I'm not a scholar in the great scholarly sense, but I could give a layman's view of the presidency and why I thought it was important.
Well, it's interesting. We have something in common. I too served in the Clinton administration, administration. I was in the State Department. And while you were in the White House, and indeed inflation did go up, I am lucky enough to be able to say that I neither started nor lost any wars during that administration.
Well, that's true because we didn't have any wars in that administration, as you know. And I think President Carter doesn't get as good a rap by historians as I think he should. Interestingly, when he came to Washington the first time, he came as a conquering hero in 1977 when he was sworn in. He'd beaten the Watergate problems that associated with the Republicans. The Democrats were not completely in love with him, but they were united behind him at that time. And then after 4 years, given all the problems we had with hostages, gas lines, inflation, and so forth, he left town into a ignominious defeat, lost to Ronald Reagan, I think 489 to 49 in terms of electoral votes, went back to Plains at the age of 56, found out he was almost bankrupt because his peanut warehouse had almost gone into bankruptcy, and he had to rebuild his life. He then spent 44 years rebuilding his life, doing election monitoring, winning the Nobel Peace Prize, doing so many different things. that when he came back, after he passed away and came back to National Cathedral and to the capital, to Lion State, he came back as a very, very respected person. So he came initially as a respected person, left unrespected, came back respected, and we all had a chance to pay our respects to him. But he was a former president for 11 times as long as he was president. So he had a lot more time to do things. I think his presidency was better than the historians at the time thought it was, but history will we'll deal with that later on.
I think his work after the presidency could serve as a model for anyone after they leave office, presidency or otherwise, giving back.
Yes, let me describe this. Normally, when presidents left office, they didn't really do very much after they left office. There wasn't much for them to do. Then FDR came up with the idea of building a presidential library. He didn't live to see it, but ultimately a presidential library was built on his Hyde Park estate. And every president since then wanted to have a library as well. What Jimmy Carter did is he expanded beyond being in a library. He made it a center. It's called the Carter Center. And that's because the library part is not as significant to him as doing things like he would do election monitoring around the world, working to eliminate river blindness or guinea worm in Africa, things like that. And subsequent presidents, when they have the age and they're enough age or early enough in their lifespan to be able to do these kind of things, they want to do that. So the Obama Center that's being built in Chicago now will enable, I think, Barack Obama, who's relatively young, to go out and do many of the things that Carter did, or maybe things differently, but he'll do things that will kind of, I think, burnish his image a bit. Some presidents are not as able to do that because they leave office and they're relatively older and they can't do the kind of things that Carter did. But Carter left, as I said, only at the age of 56. So that's a teenager today by the standards of our presidents. And I think Carter deserves a lot of credit for kind of reinventing the ex-presidency.
So, look, after having met and spoken with and worked for presidents, and now have written this book and spoken with experts on the presidencies, what, in your view, defines great presidential leadership?
Well, great presidential leadership, unfortunately, often involves being in bad situations and getting the American people out of it. So either a recession, depression, or some economic calamity, and or a war and winning the war. So if you are fortunate enough not to be in a great economic calamity and you don't have a war, you may not be seen as a great president. For example, Eisenhower was, in my view, a pretty good president. At the time, I thought he was an old man because I was so much younger, but he became president when he was 62, which really relatively young, left at 70. But if you lived through the Eisenhower years, you'd say, well, he was kind of boring and they didn't do very much. But actually, we had no great recessions. We didn't have any economic calamities, and we didn't have anybody lost in war. So he wasn't considered a great president, though he had been a great general. Today, people are revising their views on Eisenhower, and I think he's now being looked at as a better president than people thought at the time. But FDR, a great president, went through World War II. Woodrow Wilson was considered at the time a great president, got us through World War I. Lincoln, of course, the greatest president of them all, got us through the Civil War. And therefore, I think you have to have a war and win a war, but it doesn't always help. George Herbert Walker Bush fought the Kuwait War, Iraq War, and we won decisively, but he ultimately lost re-election.
Let me ask you, did these conversations challenge or reshape your view at all of the presidency?
Well, I've spent a lot of time thinking about it, so I wouldn't say it reshaped my view, but it gave me more detail and more appreciation for the complexity of the job. And here's when I say it's the highest calling. When this country was created in 1776 and then under the Constitution in 1788, the president wasn't the greatest figure in the Western world or in any part of the world. The president was managing a very small number of states. George Washington had 13 states to preside over. We had 3 million people at the time. 500,000 of them, or about 500,000, were slaves. So a very small country. Nobody at that time would have thought the president of the United States is the most important person in the world. Today, we think the president of the United States is the most important person in the world. And that's probably been ever since World War I, when Woodrow Wilson went to Paris, spent 6 months negotiating the end of the World War I and the Treaty of Versailles. And I think he was viewed as the savior of the Western world because he helped negotiate the end of the war, but also he lent so many thousands of troops, hundreds of thousands of troops that helped the Allies win the war. Ever since that time, the president has been considered the greatest figure in the world, really. So FDR made it even more apparent how important the president is. And I think anybody who's the president of the United States, even if he's not a significant president in this day and age, is the most powerful person in the world for sure. And I think we should recognize that.
Well, look, speaking of the world, I know that over the course of your career, you've met with many foreign leaders, far and wide abroad. And is there any similarities you see between the type of leadership that they face, whether it's in Western Europe, Asia, Latin America, and the U.S. presidency?
Well, there are different electoral systems, of course. So in our system, you can start out not knowing anybody and not having any resources, Jimmy Carter being a good example, Barack Obama another one, and you go through the primary system, you work your way up, and you become the head of the government. In other governments, typically you work your way up through a system where you are a member of a party and the party elects you as the leader, and then you may go in front of the electorate, but you've really been selected as the leader of a party. This is true in a parliamentary system. So it's a different kind of system we have to get our people to the top of the government. And no other country quite does it the way we do. But I've met other foreign leaders and people who are running other countries, and some of them, despite the fact they got there differently and have different skill sets, they all have some impressive qualities to them. And in my lifetime, I would say some of the most impressive foreign leaders were Lee Kuan Yew at Singapore, for sure. Many people regard him as one of the more talented people to ever run a country, though it was a very small country. Or Angela Merkel did a spectacular job as Chancellor of Germany. Or Margaret Thatcher, a great job as Prime Minister of England. There have been some spectacular leaders that have surfaced around the world in the time that I've been alive and been able to meet some of these people.
Over the years, the ebb and flow of the power of the presidency has changed. I learned this firsthand because I did serve with the Senate Watergate Committee. And at that time, the power of the presidency ebbed downwards. But talk to us a little bit about the challenges between the presidency and the other two branches of government.
Well, when the Constitution was created, the Article 1 was the legislative branch, the Congress. That was thought to be the most powerful branch. The second branch, or Article 2, dealt with the presidency. And the presidency was not really, it wasn't clear what it was supposed to be. And really, it was not until the very end of the Constitutional Convention, then they kind of decided, okay, we'll let the president have unlimited amount of terms. Each term will be 4 years. They weren't really sure whether they wanted a king, they wanted somebody who didn't serve very long, and it went back and forth and so forth. I would say that the presidency has evolved over a period of time to be a different job than the founding fathers envisioned. And it takes many different skill sets than the founding fathers probably envisioned. When the founding fathers put the Constitution together, it was known that George Washington would be the first president, and that's why they really let the president be called the commander-in-chief as well, because they knew Washington had military skills. If somebody who had no military skills was going to be the first president, if it was John Adams, for example, I doubt that the Constitutional Convention would have said the president is also the commander-in-chief.
So we're about to enter a very important year in the history of our country, the 250-year birthday of the signing of our birthday and the anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And we're going into this at kind of a critical time in our society. I've read some polls recently, David. One poll showed that 38% of young Americans don't believe that patriotism is important. Another recent poll I read had to do with Generation Z, and 25 to 30% of Generation Z believes that political violence is okay to enact change. Here we are on the verge of this 250-year anniversary in a culture that has changed so much. What can we do to try to bring this country back together and celebrate in unanimity our birthday?
Well, the 250th will have lots of celebrations, and hopefully it'll bring out some patriotism. But there's no doubt that the younger generation is different than your generation or my generation, but I should point out that every time you have older generations, people in their 50s, 60s, or 70s, they always say the younger generations has gone to pot. George Washington's father thought that that George Washington's generation wasn't really going to be very impressive. So it's true of every generation. I think in this case, the biggest change has probably been social media. Social media has captured the minds of the younger people, and they get their news, they get their views. So often they connect with other people through social media, which can be a very isolating device, as we've seen. But I think in the end, civilization will go forward, and every older generation will always say the next generation is not as good. In the end, the generation turns out to be better than people thought.
I think that's well said, and I certainly agree with you, with only one exception, and that is your reference to my being not in the same generation or of the same generation of you. I think we're pretty close together, my friend.
Well, I don't know, you're probably younger than me. You look younger than me. Um, but my generation is what's called the baby boomer generation. And the boomer generation is a very interesting generation. For our entire lives, we have been the center of attention because there were so many of us. When people came back from World War II, the soldiers had a lot of, children afterwards, families were built, and the baby boomers became the biggest part of the population. And we've always thought we were the center of the universe. And now we like being the center of the universe, so we're not getting off the stage. Think about it. When my father was a blue collar worker, he retired at the age of 55. Seemed a little young to me, but he retired at 55. Then the retirement age was 60, the generally retirement age in the society. Um, Today, the baby boomers, they don't seem to ever want to retire. So I'm now 76. I'm working as hard as I did when I was 56 or 46, and I don't really want to get off the center stage. The last president of the United States was 82. The current president of the United States is 79. So, the baby boomer generations, we're not going away. And now with the new study of longevity, and I have a TV series on longevity, and I've learned a lot more about it, it's possible that the baby boomer generation will be around for quite a bit longer time.
Well, let's hope so. But look, I just read something about you contributing to the building of a new museum focused on capitalism. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I've contributed to a lot of different museums, and let me just say, I was the chairman of the Smithsonian for a number of years. The Smithsonian has 21 museums, and so if you're chairman of the Smithsonian, you get to love museums. And I've supported a number of their museums and so forth, and I believe that museums have a important educational impact on people, and that's why I think it's important. And let me just describe this what I mean. The human brain has evolved enormously over the last 400,000 years since we came out of caves as Homo sapiens about 400,000 years ago. And the human brain has not evolved in one area, and that's this. If I look at a computer slide of the Declaration of Independence, I can push a button and go on the next slide. It doesn't have a big impact because you can push a button and you kind of go on to something else. Um, at some point, looking at a computer slide will be the same as actually having experienced the way the human brain might evolve in the future. But today, the brain still says, I'd rather see something in person and I'll get more out of it. So if you preserve the Washington Monument or the Lincoln Memorial and you get people to go there, that experience of going there will be a more educational experience for them and a more uplifting experience than just pushing a button on a computer and see a picture of the Washington Monument or Lincoln Memorial. So I think in time that may change. But right now, I believe that museums and monuments are an important part of our society, and people still should go there. They'll learn more. And one of my things that I've been trying to do with my philanthropy is educate people about our history, because very often we don't know as much about our history as people in other countries know about our history. And the result is we're likely to make the same mistakes. The theory of studying history is that you learn from the past so you can avoid the mistakes of the past and do the good things in the future that were done well in the past. But as we don't study history as much anymore, we're not likely to be able to benefit from those mistakes. It used to be when I was in college, and probably when you were in college, about 8 to 9% of undergraduates majored in history. Now it's about 1%, because everybody wants to be a STEM major because they think they can't get a job at Goldman Sachs or Google or the equivalent if they haven't majored in a STEM subject. But I like to remind people that many people running large companies these days and running large parts of society are actually social science majors, but it's hard to convince young people of that.
So you said earlier that if you want to do something, you'll find time for it. And you had the Smithsonian, the Economic Club in DC, the chairmanship of the Kennedy Center. How much time do you devote to your philanthropic activities as compared to your business activity?
Well, I should point out that I was the chairman of the Kennedy Center for 14 years. The
Right.
current president of the United States decided he wanted to be the chairman of the Kennedy Center, so he's now the chairman. But I did it for quite a while. Um, I'd say if you really want to get something done, find somebody who's busy, and that person will get it done for you. In other words, people who are busy are getting things done. And if you ask somebody who really knows how to get things done, has got things done in the past, they will find a way to get something done. So in my case, I do a lot of nonprofits. I chair a lot of nonprofit boards and nonprofit capital campaigns, and I write books and I have TV shows. But I love everything I'm doing, so it's not work for me. And when you love what you're doing, it's pleasurable, and so I want to have more pleasure, and so everything I'm doing is enjoyable. So I probably could spend more time on the business world, but I've made a fair amount of money already, and I don't need to feel that I have to make more money in order to be happier.
Speaking about loving what you do, this is your first season in ownership and management of the Baltimore Orioles. Not a great season for Baltimore. I'm sorry about that. But as you know, I'm a Nats fan, and we're even worse. Tell us about your introduction to the world of baseball.
Well, I had been a, little league baseball player as a boy, and my athletic career peaked around the 8 or 9. Though I was an all-star little leaguer, but I think everybody was an all-star. Probably I made everybody on the all-star team. So I really lost track with baseball over the ensuing 60 years or so, and did other things. But I felt in looking at what I've done with my life, I hadn't done as much as I should have done for Baltimore, my hometown. That gave me a public school education that was very good. Gave my parents a public school education. My parents were raised there. They're married there. They're buried there. I'll be buried in Baltimore as well. And I kind of felt I should do more for Baltimore. I've done some things for Johns Hopkins, which is based in Baltimore, but not quite as much as I should have done. So I decided I would try to help revitalize the city by buying the Orioles and revitalizing them. It hasn't worked out yet. The team won first place the year before I bought them. Then the first year I had the ownership, they came in second place. This year we're in last place. I've increased the salaries by about 60% of the players and dramatically increased the back office budget, but we didn't do that well this year. So I am going to have to go back and fix that, and hopefully next year will be better.
Well, you guys have one of the most beautiful baseball stadiums in the country. And although I'm a National League fan, when I do focus on the American League, I love the Orioles because they're almost my hometown club.
Well, what happened is in around the 1950s, when the cost of building stadiums became bigger, municipalities started building what I call androgynous stadiums, which they could be used for baseball or they could use be football and are used for concerts too. But when the Orioles moved out of their androgynous stadium called Memorial Stadium, and in 1992 and 93 they opened up Camden Yards. It was the first time somebody had built an inner city baseball stadium only for baseball in about 60 years or so. And as a result, everybody loved it because it's downtown, you're close to the field, you don't feel like you're in a gigantic football stadium. And every stadium for baseball built since then has kind of followed this model. But now our stadium is 30 years old. So in this off season, in about a week or so, we will start renovating Camden Yards and do many things that other stadiums have done, but we haven't done in the ensuing 30 years. So we hope to update, refresh, but keep the culture and the character of Camden Yards as good as it has been.
Oh, please don't tell me you're going to change the food.
We're going to improve the food.
Oh, no. I think the food is terrific.
It's good, but we're going to make it even healthier.
All right. Look, I know you're very busy. I just have one final question for
Sure.
you. And that is, how can we ensure that future generations remain engaged in the democratic process?
Well, I think educating people about government, how it works, is be important. I think having civics tests for people who are younger would be good. Some states require a civics test to be passed in order to get your driver's license. That's not the worst idea in the world. but I think we've got to excite younger people about the importance of being involved in government and voting. At the moment, we have a relatively small percentage of people voting, and younger people are voting in lower numbers than older people. So right now, for example, in a presidential election, we're lucky to get about 60-some% of the people to vote, of the eligible people. In midterm elections or mayoral elections or gubernatorial elections, you may get in a primary 5 to 10% of the people voting. So what we got to do is get people to kind of want to vote more, learn more about government, and feel that by participating in government, they're doing something useful with their society, with their life.
I love your comment about the teaching of civics. It's so critically important. And we kind of left that in the past. But now I think it's just as important for us to be teaching what I call digital civics.
I agree. So let me give you one statistic that may be alarming. There was a test done not long ago of people who live in the United States who are native of the United States. And in 49 out of 50 states, a majority of the people who took this basic civics test, the same one that you would take if you're going to be a naturalized citizen in this country, 49 out of 50 states, a majority of people failed that test. In only one state, Vermont, did a bare majority pass the test. 91% of the people who take this same test who are trying to be a naturalized citizen, in other words, they're born in another country, they lived here 5 years, they take the test, 91% pass. The irony is people who live in another country, they come here, they know more about our government, how it operates, than the people born here. So we've got to do something to change that.
Agreed. David, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to see you. And can you keep your secret?
Well, if it's big enough, I can.
I am older than you.
No, you're younger. You're much younger looking. You're much younger looking. I'd rather look like you than look like me. But thank you very much. Okay?
All right. Thank you. And
right,
take
bye.
care. And again, I want to thank you all for joining us. With every conversation, we have the opportunity to build bridges and unite us.
This is Building Bridges with Michael Hershman.